Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2, episode 15 of the Dateable AF podcast. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the topic of fight right, how to argue without burning the house down.
Burning the house down.
Burning it down. So, if your last argument with your partner had more plot twists than a Netflix thriller, this episode is for you. So I do want to say that most couples fight, but how you fight is really going to determine whether that fight tears your relationship apart or whether you actually can get closer, or whether you're going to combust and just blow the whole thing up. So we want to start by just telling you that fighting isn't failure. It doesn't mean that something in your relationship is wrong. And that fair fighting is a skill that you develop. It's not a personality trait that you're just born with. So if you don't know how to do it, we can help you.
I will start off by saying that every healthy couple does fight. And if you will eventually have an argument. And if you're not arguing at all, then somebody is not talking. Somebody is
not being honest.
They're not being honest in there. So there's that.
That is true. And I was just talking to Rachel before we started recording and saying that I have had in my practice a slew of couples that are having a ton of conflicts right now. So that is part of what's fueling our desire to do this podcast, is because I've been doing a lot of coaching about how to fight fair and how to keep making the relationship work, even if you're having some conflict. So we're looking forward to talking about this tonight.
Well, I did a little research earlier today, just because I was curious about if there was any research on lesbian couples arguing or fighting, and if there's different nuances to that versus other types of couples. And
awesome. What did you find out?
Generally, the research shows that lesbian couples tend to do a better job of fighting in a fair manner. And they listed a lot of reasons, that because it's two women, and that there's a deeper, probably a more naturally deeper understanding of the emotions of the other person, that there is just some differences between men and women, and sort of oftentimes how they approach situations. And so it's generally, I didn't pull up any strong data and analyze it to see all of the nuances of that. But
generally, women tend to fight better than
yes,
men or heterosexual couples.
We're more kind to one another, and also probably definitely wanting to stay connected. I think it's in our nature to want to stay connected. So seeking that connection, which we'll talk about throughout this podcast, about the importance of that being at the root of what you're doing, is maintaining connection.
Yep, I think that's great. And it does make sense that the research showed that, because I do think in general, women tend to be more communicative. And at least in a lot of the couples that I work with, if it's a heterosexual couple, the guy will often just shut down. Or rage. So it makes sense that women probably do that a little bit better. I want to talk about why people fight the way that we fight. And I would say that one of the big ones for that is your patterns that you learn from your family of origin. I see this so much that some people come from a family that just did not talk about things. Other people come from families who yelled. Other people came from families who felt like they had to fix everything. And I will say, in all fairness, I definitely see this in my relationship with Joe, that I came from a family who everything was fine at all times. We just swept things under the rug, and there was a little passive aggressive, maybe like a little shutting the cabinet a bit too hard or things like that. But if you were asked about it, it was like, nope, everything's fine. And I have had to do a lot of work in my own therapy to get past that, because that was definitely my nature. Just let's sweep it under the rug and move on. And Joe comes from a family of street fighters. They are ready at all times to put up their dukes and defend themselves. And I will say that Joe has also worked very hard to undo those patterns. That, if you ask anyone in her family, if you say something like, "Hey, do you know where my keys are?" The automatic response is, "Well, I didn't take them." So she, automatically jumps to, somebody's about to attack me and I got to defend myself. And so between the two of us, if we had carried on those patterns, it would not have been pretty. So luckily we have, we both embraced the value of therapy and have learned to do it better. But looking back at family of origin, it's a big thing.
It is. And so and Sarah knows my mother, and she's a street fighter as well. And so, back that one up into a corner, and let me just say,
it's not going to be pretty.
she's gonna win. But I think to your point is that it is extremely important to know the origin and to understand that those dynamics, both the good, healthy things and the not so healthy things, because you are likely to bring those into a relationship. And that if you don't understand the things that were not healthy and work on them, you're likely to just bring those right on in. Yep. and it's not effective. And so if you say, I just grew up in a family and everybody was happy all the time and everything was okay, I'm just going to say it again. That is not, if nobody ever fought in front of you, you got to think about that, because then it doesn't teach you how to do that. And you need to have those skills to do it. So same in that I also have done a lot of work around keeping the good parts of my mother's directness and willingness to not walk around the elephant in the living room, which I love.
Yes, it's definitely helpful.
Yes. And then also being very clear about not wanting to street fight, and I'm not interested, and I've deleted that part of me.
You've tamed the street fighter a little bit.
I did not want to carry that legacy on. Thank you.
Yes, that is for sure. Yep. And I do see couples making excuses for not learning to do it better. Well, that's just the way my family did it. My family all yelled at each other, so I'm going to keep yelling at you. And that's not helpful. You probably didn't really like it when your family yelled at you. And so changing that is not a bad thing, but it does take some effort, because the default is you'll just do it the way you grew up seeing it.
Yeah. And this is really important in dating. If you date long enough, you likely will you should begin to see these things. And if you are dating somebody that is not a fair fighter, then you want to pay attention to that. And definitely. Especially, I would be asking, okay, let's talk about work you've done around that. You want to address it, because don't assume that when you decide to hook up with them full time, if you do, that's going to change. If they haven't worked on it, it's big red flag.
Yep, absolutely. So in addition to family of origin stuff, there are also things about the way that humans are wired, our nervous system responses that impact the way we fight. You've probably heard of the fight or flight response, and they have added a couple on to that some people, their natural instinct is to fight. Some people's response is to run away, which is flight. But the other response that some people do is freeze. Like they can't think on their feet. They can't respond right away, which can be really infuriating in a fight. Or the other response is fawning. So instead of getting in there and hashing something out, you just try to appease the other person. Mm-hmm. So if thinking about those, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, those are ways that your particular nervous system responds in the face of a conflict. So it's something that you need to be aware of if you do one of those things.
And the physiology behind that, I think it is important to know that there is a chemical response when that is happening, where you are shooting cortisol through your system. And until you can tamp that down, and if you are with someone who, let's say, has had a lot of trauma, they have triggers that if you hit that, you will not do yourself any favors continuing to try to go in there and settle or win an argument.
Yep.
Until all of that has tamped down and the cortisol has filtered throughout their system and they are able to re-regulate themselves. And so that, if you've ever been with somebody where you've seen them all of a sudden just spin like a top, and
yep.
yeah, then you've hit it. It's one of those responses, they'll run away. They're going to be in your face. They're going to do something weird.
Yep. Yep. And I don't know if you saw this in your research, but I have read that if a person's heartbeat gets above 100 beats a minute, that is a sign that your physiology is getting out of whack and that your irrational brain is taking over when your heart rate gets that elevated. So it's a good sign that it's time to take a time out.
Yeah. Yeah. I have heard, I have heard a little bit about that. Yes.
Yep. So John Gottman, we've talked about him on our podcast before, but he's kind of the guru of couples therapy research. And his research, it's a fairly well-known tenet of his research, but he talks about the 4 horsemen. And these are things that he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that appear in couples, things that cause conflict or things that exacerbate conflict. And those 4 horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So criticism is just what it sounds like. It's basically you're just looking for what's going wrong with your partner instead of what's going right, and you're tearing them down. Defensiveness is when you can't hear something because your first response is to try to defend yourself. Like my example about, do you know where my keys are? And it's like, I didn't take them. You're not trying to solve the problem of where the keys are. You're trying to defend yourself and prove that you weren't the one that caused the problem. The 3rd horseman is contempt. And this one is a really tricky one to overcome. And I almost think it's like a phase that you can flip into in a relationship. And it's where you just don't have anything good to say or think about your partner. You think that you're better than that person, and you're constantly belittling them and putting them down and just viewing them through a really negative lens. Stonewalling is basically the silent treatment or freezing someone out. It's when you just shut down and you won't talk. So those are things that are that show themselves in a relationship that can lead to really unhealthy kinds of conflict.
Don't you think that, I've seen this happen. I know some people who do this, is that in a relationship, you get to know somebody really well and you know all their weaknesses, and you begin to really understand some of those nuances. And when you're mad and you get in a fight with them, then you actively deal with them in ways that you know are going to create a problem. So for instance, if you know that you are with somebody who rages, oftentimes they're looking for somebody to push back, to come back so that it can continue. And if you just go silent and completely back away, it's like pouring gasoline on that.
It infuriates them.
Yes. And I know somebody in a past relationship, and they intentionally, when they were mad at the other person, there was enough resentment in there that they would do that in a fight, knowing that, and it makes them look like the good guy and the other person look like the crazy guy, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have definitely seen that. I perhaps might have participated in that a little bit myself. In my very distant past, I will say, but I was when I was very young, I was in a relationship with somebody who would get loud and lose their temper. And the more they lost their temper, then the calmer I got and the quieter I got. And I wasn't thinking of it at the time as being manipulative, but it definitely, I knew that it was going to push their buttons if I did that. And so, yeah, that's a terrible thing to do, to, give someone the opposite response that they're looking for, because it is, like you said, pouring gasoline on a fire.
Right. And another example, I was recently talking to someone that I know that this is sort of goes to the whole idea of really sharing openly and when you're trying to get to know somebody, to go ahead and that's the part of the dance of exposing yourself, is they grew up in a home that was very critical of them.
Mm.
And they were criticized.
Mm-hmm.
And then and that information is helpful because when you're fighting, you can move right into something. If you're not really good at it, as we're going to continue to discuss, you tend to go right into being critical of them because you're talking about them personally. And that can, if you don't know that about the person, because you have to be very careful if that is a sensitive spot, that knowing that you're probably not going to have an effective argument if you are taking shots at them.
Yep, absolutely. And if that's another way of pouring gasoline on that person's fire, that they are sensitive to criticism. And so if they hear it, it's not going to go well. So yeah, knowing someone's style, I think, is super, super important. So let's talk a little bit about what fair fighting actually means. Like what even is fair fighting?
Yeah, that is so easy to say when you're not in the middle of it. So the part of it, it's quite honestly, I feel like I'm a pretty fair fighter. I mean, I have a real sensitivity towards that, and
I would
so
agree with that.
I'm not one to try to do any of those things. But what is difficult is maintaining the desire to connect.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling angry and frustrated, I don't want to connect.
You're not thinking about the connection. You're just thinking how mad you are.
I am. I'm like, no, I do not want to connect with you because you're being an asshole.
Yep. But you did hit something important on the head, that even if you disagree with someone, it doesn't mean that you have to disconnect. And if you can keep that in mind, that's going to be kind of the rudder that guides how you disagree.
Ooh, I think that's a hard one. I mean, just for me personally, for sure.
It's really hard. The second thing is that we want to make sure to stay on topic, because it's so easy to kind of throw everything in but the kitchen sink. You're bringing up something that happened 20 years ago, or bringing up things from the past in general is just not that helpful when you're in an argument. And saying, well, I might have done that, but you did this other thing. It's not a score. There's no score here. It's a team sport. And if one member of the team loses, both people lose. So yeah, trying to stay connected and trying to stay on topic. Those two things are super helpful.
How often have you in the past, you get in it and you're in a heated one, and you look up and you're talking about shit that doesn't have anything to do with where you started, but it's all, now you're just mad and you're just going through the whole.
Yep. Everything that person's ever done that pissed you off is going to come out. Yep. It's true. And one of the things I really encourage the couples in my office to remember is that if you can think about the issue that you're fighting about as the enemy, not the person that you're fighting with as the enemy, it's like the two of us together are trying to tackle this external issue. It makes it easier to stay on the same team.
But what if it is something that they do that you don't like?
Well, give me an example and I'll tell you how to do that.
Like chew with their mouth open.
Oh, well, then the issue is the chewing. It's not the person doing the chewing.
That's a real stretch. No, I'm not.
But you're not going to get in a big fight with someone I don't think, about chewing with their mouth open.
Okay, so you say.
But let's say that you're fighting about how to spend money. Like one of you wants to buy something and the other person doesn't want to buy something. Then the common issue is, how do we spend our money? It's not you want to spend it one way and I want to spend it the other. The common issue is we both want to have financial success in our relationship. So let's look at that as the common ground that we can both agree on.
Yeah, and when I was reading this stuff today, the major things that people fight about are money, sex, infidelity. I can't think of, there are like maybe 4 or 5 main things that I'm sure you see.
Sex and money are the two big things that people bring.
And to that,
Parenting
yeah,
too is another
parenting
one.
for
Mhm.
sure. Oof, a lot to say about that. But um, the I could see where if you're trying to the sex conversation, ooh, that's a dicey one, and that it
Mhm.
is could be very difficult to keep that away from it being not being about the person, but being about the thing.
Yep. Yep, because it does, it's easy to make that about the person. So, yep. And I think in general, just you want to stay away from character assassination. You're not trying to annihilate the person. That doesn't actually do you any good for your partner to feel crappy. And one of the things that feels like it moves into character assassinations are the words always and never.
I hate
And
those words. I hate those
oh,
words.
yeah, because it's not true. There's not something that you always do or something that you never do.
Yeah.
And you could say, I don't really see you doing these things, or, yesterday I saw you doing this thing. That's different than you always do this thing.
Yeah.
So it's though that's kind of a basic rule of thumb of fighting, but you'd be surprised how many people either don't know that rule or they don't utilize that. But stay away from always and never when you're fighting.
That one is much easier, I think. I don't like it, and it's very clear to me how bad it is. I don't like it coming at me, and I try not to throw it out there.
Yep. Yep. Those are not helpful words. And they rile people up because what if you say you always do this, then I want to give you an example of when I didn't
One.
do it.
All right.
So it just makes me want to dispute you if you say those absolute things. So we want to give you listeners some rules for fair fighting. We have 7 of them. And I will start with the first one, which is that when you're in an argument, it's helpful to use I statements instead of accusing the other person. I'll give you an example. I could say, you don't care about my feelings. Or I could say, I feel dismissed when you look at your phone while I'm trying to talk to you. So you don't want to assume, and you don't want to criticize what the other person's doing. You want to explain to them how you're feeling.
Put that damn phone down.
Put your phone down. that we'll add that to the list of common things people fight about. Holy moly, people fight a lot about their partner being on their phone.
Yep. And as we think about these, I think it's good to think about some of these things you can address before they happen.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, the phone one, because we know it's a big deal, is if I want to have a serious conversation with you, I'm going to say straight up, hey, or if we're going to cook dinner together, hey, would it be okay if we just put our phones aside for now? Because I really just want to chat. I'd like for them to not be disrupting us or whatever, instead of waiting until it happens.
Yes. Yes. And I don't want to get too far off track here, but it's so habitual that if you hear your phone, you want to look at it. And, or now, we have all these devices. We've got the smartwatch. And so when my watch buzzes, it is a habit for me to look at my wrist. And if you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody, it's rude. And they either think you're checking the time like you're bored, or or they know that you're actually looking at the text message you just got. So really, that is a big one, to set your phone aside. If you can't refrain from looking at your Apple Watch, take your watch off while you're having a serious conversation or while you're supposed to be present.
I've had my grandfather come out of me periodically because of the watches. I'm like, are you taking medicine?
Exactly. You checking the time? And it's funny how people notice it. I was visiting a relative who has severe Alzheimer's, and I was chatting with her, and I got a text on my watch, and I looked down at my wrist, and she said, "Do you have to be somewhere?" So even she knew. Even in her limited awareness, she knew that it was rude of me to be looking at my watch in the middle of a conversation. I was like, "Ooh, busted."
Oh my God.
Oh, so rule number 2 for fair fighting, in addition to using I statements, you want to make sure that you stay on the issue. Stay with the present day issue, the specific boundaried issue that you're talking about right now, because you don't want to go back to, well, 5 years ago, you did X, Y, and Z. It's like, no. Well, we can talk about that later if we still need to, but let's talk about what's happening right now first. Like stay on point.
Yes. And if you know that you're one of those people that you hang on to something like a snapping turtle, and you
Oof.
somehow, some people, they log all of that information. So they've got it right there at the ready.
At the ready.
In 2022 at 6:02 p.m., you did this.
Yeah.
Like, girl, no, you need to do something to get rid of that.
Yeah. Don't talk to your therapist about that. Don't bring up those historical things with your partner. Not good. Not
Move
good.
on or work through it.
Move on. That's right. The third rule of fair fighting is that you want to mindfully take breaks before you have a breakdown. So if you feel yourself starting to get heated, if you feel you're about to lose your temper, if you feel you're going to break down in tears and not be able to continue the conversation, those are all signs that you need a timeout. So here's how you take a timeout without the other person feeling abandoned. You say, hey, I'm starting to get heated. I need to take a break for about 20 minutes and then I'm going to come back and we can finish talking about it. Or you might need to take a break till tomorrow, but you let the person know calmly that you need a break and you let them know when you're going to come back. And then you initiate coming back at the appointed time.
Yep.
So.
I recently used that technique and my buttons got pushed and I accelerated really quickly into and I just stopped talking. Like I just caught myself and I stopped talking.
Yep.
Took some breaths and then I let a little time pass. And then what the very first thing I did when I came back was say, hey, look, I'm sorry at the way that I went into that. I'm mad about this, but I'm sorry about that approach.
Yeah. So you knew you needed a break. You took some breaths and were able to come back to it.
Namaste.
All that yoga is paying off for you, sister.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So the fourth rule of fair fighting is don't try to read the other person's mind. Don't make assumptions about what the person's thinking or what they're trying to do or how they're trying to make you feel. Try to replace those assumptions with curiosity. And if you think the person's doing something to specifically annoy you or get under your skin, try to be curious about it and say, what were you hoping to accomplish when you did that? Because maybe their intentions were something completely different. So try not to jump right to the negative.
And I'm also on the opposite side of that. If you are the person, if your person is making assumptions, then let them know that their assumptions are not correct. Don't hold on to that and let them flounder over there. Just put it out there and say, no, actually, it's not what I was thinking,
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the fifth rule of fair fighting is that you want to own your own part. And I think we've probably talked about this on the podcast before, but I think when we were talking about apologies, that let's say that your partner has done 10 annoying things and you have done one annoying thing. You're going to own that 10%. You're going to own the fact that you did that one annoying thing. And you're not going to say, but you did 10 annoying things. Because as hard as that might be, but taking even a tiny bit of the responsibility that's genuinely yours is really a way to make the other person feel safer. And it makes the argument a little softer. So saying like, hey, in your case, hey, here's what I could have done differently. Like I escalated quickly and I could have taken some breaths sooner so that I didn't escalate so quickly. And I'm sorry I did that. So owning your part is a big part of what makes fighting fair.
Yeah, I think it's very self-explanatory and great rule of thumb for sure.
Yep. Yep. So rule number 6 of fair fighting is that you're not fighting to win. Because like I just said,
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
everybody gets a trophy, Rachel.
No, they do not.
That when you're in a relationship, it's a team sport. So if your teammate loses, guess what? You lose too. So there's no winning. So you're really just fighting to understand each other, and you're trying to learn, like, what does validation sound like? You don't have to agree with someone to validate that you're hearing them. And saying something like, I get why this hurt you, even if you didn't mean to hurt the other person's feelings, if you let them know that you understand why something hurt them, and if you don't understand, then that's really what you're trying to get to. You're trying to get to an understanding of why they feel the way that they feel. Because if you're trying to win, I mean, you might win, but you're going to be lonely at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're sure not going to get, the bed's going to be cold. Let me just tell you that. But
That's right.
so do you think that if that person who hit you with the pickleball, should she have, she was fighting to win. I don't know
He
that
was
she
fighting
really,
to win, and we were just warming up.
and you
We
felt
weren't
that
even playing a game.
you felt that you needed an apology, didn't you? You felt that you needed some understanding.
Do we have to keep bringing this up every episode?
Well, because the other day, I just feel like sometimes we have to, because recently, we were discussing Sarah's butchness or lack thereof too.
Rachel's trying
And,
to hit me in all my sensitive spots right now, apparently.
and so I'm just saying that I don't, some of us who've grown up fighting to win
Mhm.
have a really difficult time keeping that on the playing field and not bringing that into the house. Others have grown up going, everybody deserves a trophy.
We're all just here to have fun, y'all. We're not trying to win. Oh, this is why we didn't work out.
I cannot believe you did that.
You were trying to win, and I was just trying for everybody to have a good time.
Oh, hell no. Boy, I want to say so much about that, but I'm just going to hold
The
that
truth
right.
comes out, y'all. The truth comes out.
For our audience, let me just tell you, she can hold her own.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh my
But let's
God.
move on.
It's like you're going to stick a dynamite into this conversation.
Speaking of pouring gasoline on the situation.
Oh my God.
Oh, no one else is going to think that's nearly as funny as we think it is.
Exactly. Oh God.
All right. So moving right along to rule number 7 for fair fighting is repair, repair, repair. So the argument matters so much less than how you repair afterward. So what you want to follow is this 3-step plan. You want to apologize. You want to plan for what's going to happen next, and you want to offer the person reassurance. And you may not be able to do the reassurance part right away, because if you're still mad, then sometimes you don't really feel like reassuring the person. But if you can say, like, hey, I'm going to need a minute to get past this, but we're not breaking up over this. Giving them some kind of reassurance that you're still around and that this isn't, you're not dying on this hill. This is just a bump in the road. So the way that you repair is super important for fair fighting.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about these red flags? Because we touched a little bit on them, like the first one, weaponized silence. That's what we were referring to earlier.
Stonewalling. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
That's what Gottman calls stonewalling. Yeah, it's not I'm taking a break and I'm announcing that I'm taking a break. It's just I'm going to give you the silent treatment, and I know that it's going to make you uncomfortable or piss you off, and I'm going to do it anyway. So definitely weaponized silence is a red flag. Another thing, and gosh, I see this so often, is this like tit for tat. Especially if I see that you're mad at me, then I'm going to get mad back at you. And I'm not even mad at you for anything, but I'm just mad at you because you're mad. And it's like, that's just going to escalate it. Instead of saying like, you seem upset. Do you want to talk about it? But it's like, well, I could tell you're mad, so I'm mad too. It's like, no, don't do that. I'm going to find something to be mad at you about because you're mad at me. That's not
silly town. What about bringing in a third? This one I love. The third parties or triangulation says, "Well, my friends agree with me, because they believe that you do it too."
Everyone knows that you're being ridiculous, like, holy moly, even your family thinks you're wrong. It's like, oh man, nope, that's a red flag. Like, just talk about how I feel. And if somebody else happens to feel that way too, that doesn't have anything to do with you. You get that person to talk about how they feel. Don't bring them into your argument.
And the gotcha arguments. It's hard to resist those. When you see an opening, it's hard not to go in there.
It's hard not to, but you can't do it. Don't do it. You don't want it. You're not trying to catch someone doing something wrong. Like, see, I told you, you always leave the light on. It's like, no, you're not trying to catch them doing something wrong. You're trying to catch them doing something right. It makes your life go so much better. But if you see someone doing that gotcha thing, that's a red flag.
Yeah. And then this threatening the relationship during minor conflicts. So like, maybe we shouldn't be together. Oof, that one is, I've had some experience with that one, some very deep experience with that one. And the person on the other side of that was doing it, well, let's just say that those chickens came home to roost.
You're like, you know what? You're right. We shouldn't be together.
I'd be very careful.
Be real careful. Yeah. And this one, that's another one, kind of like the always and never, that it seems like common sense, but God, you would be so amazed at how many couples threaten divorce or leaving or breaking up. And it's like, don't do that. You are not going to break up in the middle of an argument. That's not how breakups happen. So, that it's just ridiculous. And it makes your relationship feel insecure. Like, you don't want that. And so, I would encourage you to say the opposite. Like, I'm super pissed off at you right now, but we're not breaking up over this. Like that, say that, because that's reassuring. But maybe we shouldn't be together. Like you said, one of these days you're going to say that and your partner's going to be like, you know what, you're right. And if that's not what you want, then be real careful about threatening that.
Well, because it could come in the middle of an argument. It's been known to happen when it's suggested. Somebody might go, okay.
And I'm going to walk right through that door. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But what I meant by that, like, you don't break up in the middle of a fight, is that the one fight is not why couples break up.
Absolutely.
And, sometimes you feel threatened, you feel insecure, you feel like maybe this is the end, but that one fight is not what's going to end your relationship. It may be a pattern of fights, and it may be that somebody's just getting to their last straw, but that's not something that you would throw out in the middle of a fight. Like, let's break up or not be together or get a divorce or whatever. Don't throw that out. That's a red flag.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fair fighting in queer relationships.
Okay. Yeah, I think in queer relationships, the power dynamics are interesting because they're not based on gender. Sometimes they could be based on who's more out, because the person who's more out typically has more power in the relationship. It could be based upon who has more support from their family and friends. If one person has a big support system and the other one doesn't, then the one with the support system has more power. And I think just the security of knowing your identity in a queer relationship, that can shift the power dynamics if you're with someone who's not quite as clear about that.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that play out for sure. And then there's this fusion temptation, which is when you feel like you're so close that just any conflict feels threatening.
Yep. Like you're so fused with this person that, you're one and the same. And so if you agree about something, then it really shakes that foundational belief that you have. So yeah, just making sure, as we've said on other episodes, that you got to keep your own life and you've got to keep your own security and your own support system so that your whole identity isn't fused with your partner. Then conflict's a little easier to tolerate, I think.
Yeah. So I had a moment there where I had to look at my phone. I just want to say that, but that's because here we are, as my air conditioner is attached to my phone, and I'm having a massive hot flash right now. I just want to tell y'all that air needed to get down now.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
I am, and I'm gonna step away from 1 second to open this door so that I don't fall right off. I feel like the Wicked Witch of the West. I'm melting right here in my seat.
Uh-oh. Well, you better get that fixed right away. So another issue with fair fighting in queer relationships that might be different than other kinds of relationships is that so often in same-sex relationships, you have shared friend groups and you have like a co-community of people. Whereas I think in heterosexual relationships, partners tend to have their own separate friend groups a little bit more often. And so if you're having conflict and you all share the same friends, you got to be really careful about how you access your support system and, make sure you're not trying to sway people or, put your friends in an uncomfortable situation, because that could happen.
Yeah. And it is a big deal. And I think a while back we were talking about this in a podcast where I was saying that helping your person understand that when you are struggling, what you are asking of your friend that you access.
Yes.
Because I think it's important for them to know, like when I'm struggling, I do not want them to pounce on the person I'm struggling with. That's not helpful. I'm not trying to get them in my corner to tell me that the other person's wrong. I don't need any of that. What I need is for them to ask me good questions and help me sort through how I'm feeling. And based on how much they know the person I love, possibly find better ways to get reconnected.
Yes. Yeah, because you want to also, going back to the threatening divorce, you want to be clear with your support system that you're not looking for a reason to get out of this relationship. You're looking for support in getting through a conflict, but that's not the same thing. So make sure that you're clear about what you want.
Yeah.
So I think too, knowing in your relationship who typically does the emotional labor, like who keeps the peace in the relationship, that sometimes in queer relationships that those things are a little dicier because they're, both people might be participating pretty equally in that, doing the emotional labor and keeping the peace. And so you just want to make sure that the power doesn't get out of whack, that the power dynamic doesn't get out of whack in that because it is a same-sex relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, should we move on to how to calm the fight or wrap up and takeaways?
Yeah, let's talk about just quickly, how do you calm the fight? If you're in real time, you're in a fight with your significant other, what can you do in that moment? So the first thing I would say is slow the pace down. And by that, I mean literally slow the pace of your talking. Like that will slow the pace of your thinking, and it will help you kind of get grounded in reality because you're not just trying to rush ahead and make the next point. You're literally trying to slow things down.
Yeah. And then sit instead of stand. I like that one a lot because just being aware of if you're standing over somebody or you're in their space, I think it is better to sit. Both people sit, and it just equals the playing field, levels the playing field.
That nobody's hovering over the other one. Yep. And if you can mutually agree on this beforehand, I think that you can use some signals, like even doing like a timeout hand signal. That can be off-putting if you haven't discussed it beforehand, because somebody might feel cut off in the middle of an argument. But if you can agree, hey, if I do the timeout signal,
if I do that, then it means that
it's time to take a break. If I flip you off, that means it's time to take a break.
Let me just say, I've never flipped anybody off in an argument.
No, I don't
I
think
mean,
I
and
have
it's
either.
the guy honking at me or something, maybe, but
That'll get you shot. So the other thing you can do is have some soothing lines at the ready so that if you practice these when you're not upset, then they'll be at the ready when you are upset. And say things like, I want to get this right with you, or I'm frustrated, but we're not breaking up over this, or we're on the same team. Things that reconnect the two of you, even though you're disagreeing about something. So practice those in your head before you get into an argument so you'll have them ready when you do start to fight.
well, when you think about the takeaways from this, I think one of the key points we talked about was fair fighting is a skill. It really is. And so this is something that you have to work on, think about, practice, because it isn't an easy thing to do in the heat of the moment.
Yep. And anybody can learn it. You just have to have the desire and like you said, practice a little bit. The second takeaway that I want folks to hear is that arguments are absolutely not a sign of relationship failure. The disconnection that can happen as a result of those arguments can lead to the relationship failing, but the argument itself is not a sign of failure.
All right. And repairs matter more than perfection. So, you're not trying to just get it perfect. You're trying to just get right with one another.
Yep. So overall, your goal is not to avoid conflict with your partner. It's to stay connected even when you're having the conflict. So if you want some discussion prompts, some things that you can talk to your partner about after you listen to this podcast, here are a few questions you can ask yourself or your partner. What's one thing that you do in fights that you want to change? How can you do this better? The second thing is when you see a certain behavior in yourself or your partner, to become curious about where that behavior came from and maybe identifying, did this come from fear or did this come from my family of origin? So getting curious about that and asking each other, which fair fighting rule do you most want to practice? So that'll give you some things to talk about outside the podcast. If you have some good stories about fair fighting, or if you have questions about fair fighting, we always want to hear from you. So you will very likely end up in our after party episode. If you send us your questions, you can message us on Instagram at dateableaf, or you can send us an email, info@dateableaf.com, and we would love to hear from you. As always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
Remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex, stay dateable.
AF.